The other night, when I saw our president speaking about election integrity, Pierce, I heard Ozzy Osbourne singing Crazy Train in my ear. That was crazy. Didn't even mention this war, will not address the American people, keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper in.
I think Curtis Sliwa has more than redeemed himself, folks. Like, he's one of my favorite commentators and a regular on Piers Morgan Uncensored. And it's because he says what he's actually thinking. You can tell he's authentic. I might not agree with everything he says. In fact, through the course of this story, you're gonna notice that there are some areas where I disagree with Sliwa. But I just really appreciate his candor, especially when he is debating an Israel firster like Josh Hammer, editor over at Newsweek. Now, let's start with what I loved, okay? Because Sliwa calls out the disastrous influence of the Israeli government in persuading President Donald Trump to enter a war against Iran. And I just love how he calls a spade here. Take a look.
Who got us into this war? Bibi Netanyahu. He sold the decapitation of the leadership to Trump, and Trump signed off on it. Then Trump complained after they wiped out Ayatollah Senior and 40 of the key leaders. Oh, we had the B group to deal with, but Bibi went in and wiped them out too. Now this so-called Ayatollah Jr. refuses to surface. People have a hit on them by the defense minister, Katz of Israel. Bibi needs to stay out of it because every time he gets involved, he gets us deeper and deeper.
So look, I think his assessment there is correct. I'm uneasy with blaming everything on the current Israeli government or blaming everything on Netanyahu. Because if you look at public opinion polling, everything that Israel is carrying out in the Middle East right now is supported by the vast majority of Israelis. If you look at the current, electoral race for the next prime minister of Israel, they're trying to out-hawk each other. That's why you have someone like Naftali Bennett, who's an opposition candidate to Netanyahu, arguing that he would be even more hawkish and he would want to start a war against Turkey. So I think Curtis Sliwa is being misled. Look, I give him a lot of credit because he's a man of a certain age. And even though it's not true that everyone in that generation supports Israel, the vast majority do. And so I think that he genuinely does support Israel still and is under the impression that the big problem here is Netanyahu. Netanyahu is a symptom of a bigger issue, a societal ill in Israel, in my opinion. Because look, even though he's not favored by Israeli citizens, even though he has low approval ratings, Israeli citizens overwhelmingly support everything Netanyahu has done to Gaza, supporting the war against Iran, the attempt to annex land in Lebanon. They support all of it. So I would just ask Curtis Sliwa to expand his horizons a little bit and look a little deeper into what's actually happening in Israel, because he'll soon realize that this goes far beyond the current Israeli government. Now, with that in mind, everything he said about how Trump was persuaded into entering this war was absolutely correct. And then he said something that I really want to push back against. Take a look.
I'm proud of our Vice President Vance for laying it out with Joe Rogan that Bibi and a certain number of his cabinet members and supporters do not want the peace process to work. I want peace. I think everybody should be advocating peace. Bibi does not want peace and he's trying to undermine it. So high five to Vice President Vance for laying that out, that Bibi is one of our biggest problems. And remember, he had his tactical air support, Lindsey Graham, no longer with us, who didn't know a war he didn't want us to get in. Bomb Mexico, annex Canada, take Greenland, invade Iraq, invade Iran, bomb Syria, bomb Libya. They're like two peas in a pod, warmongers, enough of this.
JD Vance is not an anti-interventionist. JD Vance is a creation of Peter Thiel, who has profited handsomely off of conflicts, off of war, off of surveilling people. Okay. I don't know how anyone can listen to the Joe Rogan episode with JD Vance. Like I don't know why I listen to these things as I'm trying to fall asleep. It was a bad idea because all it did was get my blood pressure up. He is so inauthentic. Did anyone listen to that conversation and think this guy is not fake? He's a normal guy, totally authentic. I'm sorry, but when you do this like laugh throughout the entire podcast episode, you've got something to hide, okay? I don't believe for a second JD Vance is a dove. JD Vance is who Peter Thiel tells him to be, okay? That's what JD Vance is. And what JD Vance is looking forward to, what he is strategizing about, is the fact that he wants to be president. He has political aspirations, and he knows that Trump was able to build a broad coalition by presenting himself as an anti-war, anti-intervention type candidate. Now, he obviously did a 180 as soon as he was elected, and anyone who was paying close attention to Trump's behavior and foreign policy in his first term would have warned you that he is not going to be a dove once he's elected. However, I mean, unfortunately, Democrats put up and anointed a weak candidate, and Trump was able to win the popular vote as a result. But my point is, JD Vance knows that he has a far greater chance of winning over Republican voters, including young Republicans, young conservatives, I should say, if he presents himself as someone who's like, a mitigating factor on Trump's foreign policy. He's working real hard behind the scenes, working around the clock for a ceasefire, Now, it's all about his political aspirations, his political dreams. He is not a dove, and I need people to stop pretending like he is. And I'm pretty good at picking up on inauthentic BS, especially from politicians. The red flags were just gigantic during that podcast episode with Joe Rogan. I just wanted to say that. Now, Josh Hammer, who's an Israel firster, there's no question about it. He's the editor over at Newsweek, really wanted to downplay Israel's influence in dragging Trump into a war against Iran. And you can understand why Israel firsters would want to do that. This war has been a disaster, and the entire globe is furious at the United States and Israel about it. Now, Josh Hammer doesn't care if the world's furious with the United States. He just wants the world to not think Israel was behind all this, because it is a deeply unpopular war that's causing a lot of pain and suffering across the globe. Thanks to the limited supply of oil, thanks to the closure of the Hormuz Strait, and now there are some blockades over in the Red Sea carried out by the Houthis. You would think that that would direct ire toward Iran and its proxies, but I think people are actually more furious about the fact that this war began as a result of Israel pushing for it. Josh Hammer wants to pretend like Israel had nothing to do with it, but we all know better. Let me give him the opportunity to present his argument, and then we'll go to Curtis's pushback on it.
Donald Trump, based on the reporting, the contemporaries reporting at the time, was the more aggressive one in that conversation.
Yeah, but we now know,
like,
Josh,
let's go right now.
We now know from all the extensive New York Times reporting a few weeks into the war, and also from the new book that's come out recently by two of their top journalists, we know what happened here. We know that Netanyahu went to see Trump multiple times in the build-up to this war. We know that it ended up with a meeting in the White House Situation Room.
Oh, yeah. Oh, hold on a second. The president dropped the F-bomb on Bibi over and over. He's effing crazy. The president has told them,
because he's a New Yorker, like you know a thing or two about
and
that.
Pulverizing. Get out of southern Lebanon. Get out of southern Syria. The president of Lebanon is in Washington today, meeting with our president at the White House, saying, you gotta pull Bibi back. He's bombing Gaza again. This guy's a warmonger. He's covering up because he doesn't want to go on trial for corruption.
Okay.
Oh, please. Well, the people of Israel will have their chance at the end of October to get him out. The sooner the better.
So again, Curtis is repeating what I think is not true in regard to all of these issues, laying squarely at the feet of Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't think that's true. I think this is a much deeper issue. Benjamin Netanyahu is a symptom of that deeper issue. With that said, though, I thought it was important for Curtis Sliwa to point out all the various theaters of war that Israel has opened up. Get out of Syria, get out of Lebanon. Like, it's so, people who deny that this is all about Israel carrying out the Greater Israel Project blow my mind. As if, so many amazing paradoxes in this entire situation, right? So consider the fact that we're all to believe that the biggest threat to all of us, to humankind, is Islam. We should be afraid of jihad, right? These terrorist Muslims are carrying out terrorist crimes like slaughtering civilians, including sniping children, shooting them in the head and the chest. You want to talk about an Islamic, invasion? How many countries has Israel invaded over the last 2 years? Like, everything Israel fearmongers about in regard to Muslims and Arabs, Israel is carrying out tenfold. So they don't respect, oftentimes you hear this argument like, oh, well, Israel has a right to exist. Okay, what are Israel's borders? Can you explain that to me? Like, what iteration of Israel's existence are we talking about here? Are we talking about the land that would be controlled by Israel under the Greater Israel Project? Do they have the right to carry that out? Because that requires them to, violate the sovereignty of their neighbors. And does the United States have to bankroll that? Do we have to build their empire? Why? It's sick. The whole thing is sick. So Josh Hammer is a scumbag, and the fact that one of the things that drives me nuts is that JD Vance thinks that he can straddle this pro-war, anti-war, strategy. But Josh Hammer in the same debate was bitching and moaning about oh, JD Vance, I'm mad that during the Rogan podcast, he said that Epstein had ties to Mossad, and there's no evidence of that. Yes, there is. Yes, there is, Josh. You're the editor of Newsweek? You're a news editor. There's extensive reporting regarding Epstein working on behalf of Israel, forging all sorts of deals with Gulf allies on behalf of Israel. It's just, he thinks we're stupid, and we're not. Now, Sliwa finally gets into something that I've been kind of saying on the show, but I want to repeat it. It bears repeating. And it has to do with what this war against Iran has signaled to the entire globe. And it is a rational thought for other countries, sovereign countries, to have. What am I talking about? Sliwa lays it out. Take a look.
We've been down this road before. Remember the evil seed of Kim Jong mentally ill behind the rice cake curtain of North Korea? Bill Clinton in his memoir said, I was moments away from sending the jets in. They'll never get a nuclear weapon. Trump chose a different approach. He met with him twice. Guess what? North Korea, which was a threat to the world, we were told, oh, these crazy people, if they have a nuclear weapon, it's Armageddon. They got 15 nuclear bombs because they know what every country knows. When you have a nuke, nobody messes with you. Look what happened
It's
to Gaddafi.
different with them, though.
Look what happened to the Ukraine. They gave up their nuclear weapons. Do you think Putin and Russia would have ever invaded the Ukraine if they still had their nuclear weapons? A nuclear weapon guarantees that nobody's going to attack your country.
And the problem
It's
now,
different in Korea, though.
Why is it different in Korea? It's different with Iran. Iran is a special threat. Iran is a special threat. Well, North Korea wasn't a special threat, because I recall all of the news reports about how we need to prevent North Korea from obtaining a nuclear weapon. They're a special threat. Now that they have a nuclear weapon, no longer a special threat. Fascinating. Fascinating. Sliwa is correct, and honestly, the consequences of this war are multifaceted. Not only does it communicate to Iran and the rest of the globe that maybe having a nuclear weapon is the right way to go if you want to prevent the United States or the West from invading, from attacking. It also shows our ass on the global stage, shows that we were only perceived as a strong military power that can bully other countries into getting anything and everything we want. But through our failures in this war, we have signaled to the world that we're actually much weaker. We're running out of missile interceptors, including, missile interceptors that we might need here in the United States as we make more and more enemies across the globe on behalf of Israel. What are we doing? This has been it's a failure for the global economy, as we know, thanks to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, thanks to the new blockade the Houthis have carried out in the Red Sea. Disastrous, just disastrous all around. And I don't know how people like Josh Hammer are still able to show their face on any show. Batya Ungar-Sargon, another example, how they show their faces on any show, attempting to defend the indefensible, but they're doing it. They're doing it. Batya Ungar-Sargon presented herself as like some working class. I'm a working class populist. It's just that I trust Trump more. First of all, don't trust members of either party because they're all full of crap. None of them are actually populists. They don't care about the working class at all. But aside from that, how stupid can you be? How can you advocate for a war that's crushing the working class? A war that has limited a third of the globe's fertilizer, which is necessary to grow food. I can't with these people. And so when I see someone like Curtis Sliwa, who's got that New York feel to him because he's a New Yorker, and he just speaks about what's actually happening and gives it to us straight, I really appreciate it because that's hard to come by these days. Yes, he's got a checkered past. I don't care. I appreciate what he's saying on Piers Morgan's show. I appreciate that he's pushing back on notions that Israel's undue influence over our government isn't a problem. I would just say he needs to expand his horizons and realize it's not just a byproduct of Netanyahu's leadership. It's a byproduct of Israeli society and culture at the moment. It's not inherent, it's not part of who they are as human beings, but they have whipped themselves up into a frenzy thinking that everyone who isn't a Zionist is a threat that must be neutralized. And the sense of entitlement in expanding your borders and stealing land that doesn't belong to you, yeah, that's frowned upon. I don't like that. A lot of people don't like it, especially when a country other than Israel, the United States, is expected to pay for it.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.